Perhaps the greatest challenge that any leader will face in their career is to build a high-performance team, because getting people to cast aside their egos and effectively sing from the same hymn sheet is a task that no one finds easy. But research over the past couple of decades has demonstrated time and time again one key overarching concept that seems to be at the heart of all high-performance teams, and it's something that can be actively cultivated, and that's something called psychological safety. So today's video is going to unpick this concept of psychological safety so that you've got the best chance of forming a high-performance team. So psychological safety is effectively... Oh, bloody fly, off. I think he's gone. Okay, so psychological safety is quite simply the shared belief among team members that the team is an environment in which it's safe to take risks. So in other words, anyone, regardless of how senior or junior they are, can feel free to speak out without reprisal. And what this concept has demonstrated from research into it over the past couple of decades is that most teams create environments in which most people unfortunately fear speaking out and challenging the status quo or addressing issues that are definitely causing the team to not be able to perform at its best. And the terms originator Amy Edmondson found this to be the case in her research into hospital settings, where she found that nurses were often unable to speak up against authoritative surgeons when they saw that something was clearly amiss or there had been some form of complications during operations. And unfortunately, in some cases, this led to the deaths of patients during routine operations. And while most performance domains fortunately don't have fatal consequences, it's very clear that if people don't feel as if they can speak up, that the team will be able to perform at its best. So psychological safety, it's not a concept that encourages a free-for-all bashing of others. It's actually one that is indicative of maturity, where people can cast aside their egos and accept criticism, feedback, and be able to effectively feel as if they are part of something bigger than themselves, that everyone is on the same level and they're all working towards the same goal. And so what can leaders or even team members themselves do to help cultivate an environment that is indicative of psychological safety? Well, that obviously depends entirely on the culture and the context in which you're operating. Some things are going to be more suitable and appropriate in some settings compared to others. But there are two key things that I want to share today that I think can be used in any performance domain, whether that's business, sports, music, education, you name it. And the first of these tips is to criticize behavior, but not identity. So a key marker of a psychologically safe team is that everyone within the team can take constructive criticism. Now, the important thing is that feedback should not be made personal. So in other words, be leveled against someone's identity. So for example, saying that they are lazy. Instead, we should look to provide feedback that is more aligned to behaviors, because this is something that is far more fluid and not fixed like someone's identity. So it's something that can actually change a lot easier. So instead of calling someone lazy, you could say something like, I don't think that you've put in enough effort to the usual standard that it's typical around here. Or you can even align that feedback to a positive ideal surrounding part of their identity that they want to be known for. So you could say to someone, as someone who values being thorough, I don't think that we've put in the level of effort necessary on this occasion. And with those latter examples, people are going to be far more receptive because it is aligned to either their identity or it is just criticizing a behavior, which can easily be changed compared to some sort of fixed identity statement, such as you're a lazy person. And now, of course, the key is to be adaptive depending on who you're talking to, because there are some people who actually can take quite blunt, direct criticism. But unfortunately, there are some people who are a bit too married to their ego, and you have to cushion the blow a little bit more. So as a leader or a team member, just be cautious as to who you're actually talking to and adjust the feedback according to their own sort of temperament, I guess. And we saw a great example of this recently through Tottenham goalkeeper and captain Hugo Lloris having a bit of a go at Son Heung-min at half-time for not tracking back during one of the games. And perhaps his reaction at the time was a bit over the top, but at the end of the game they were embracing. So obviously this seemed to work because it enabled them to get the victory ultimately. And Tottenham manager Jose Mourinho even said that this event was
beautiful.
And look, ultimately it just means being adaptive. depending on the context and who's in your team surrounding the feedback that you do give. So you're not going to sprint over and get into Chris's face if he didn't CC you into that important email, are you? But the core overarching thing is to create a culture in which criticism is expected and accepted so that the team can ultimately improve and perform at its best. And the second thing to create a psychologically safe environment is to actually treat each individual as unique within your team. Because despite being in a team, every individual is unique and they enjoy being known for that uniqueness. Simply put, people feel cared for if people remember specifics about them in terms of their lives, their interests, and their personal background. And there's a fantastic case study / example of this in action that's presented in Daniel Coyle's book, The Culture Code, in which he details some of the fantastic ways that legendary NBA coach Greg Popovich manages to forge such a tight connection with his team members. And the interesting thing about Popovich is that on the surface, he seems quite a demanding and sometimes quite grumpy coach, someone who doesn't really take any BS. But when you actually hear what he's like with players behind the scenes, you realize he's got a bit more of a softer spot. And this is something that enables him to get the most out of his players year after year. And one of the great examples of this is that Popovich is known to spend 2 to 3 to 4 days with potential new recruits to just get to know them. And he will spend that time with them talking to them about everything except basketball. Because ultimately Popovich understands that these guys, despite being elite athletes, are human beings first, and that they've got their own other passions, interests, and personal stories. And so from taking the time to learn all of this, he experiences 2 benefits. 1, a stronger sense of connection with his team members, so that they're far more willing to go that extra mile for him. And then 2, he's able to tap into what they value and how they really think, so that he can deliver coaching points in idiosyncratic ways that really resonate with them. And so they can get behind the overarching goals of the team because they've been communicated these in a way that really speaks volumes to them. And look, treating each member uniquely doesn't mean that you have to go way above and beyond. It just means knowing a few specifics so that people feel like they belong. And people who feel like they belong feel more safe. And if they feel more safe, they feel more likely to be able to speak up, which is at the heart of a psychologically safe team. So for example, which leader or teammate would you want to go that extra mile for? The one that asks you, how was your weekend? Or the one that asks you, how was your weekend? Did you do that hot yoga session again? These simple things really do matter to people. And again, it just enables them to feel like they really belong, which means they then feel really safe in that environment, which then ultimately means they feel like they can speak up and help the team push through any challenges, problems, and issues to resolve. So these are just 2 ways in which you can help create a more psychologically safe environment for your team. And look, these are far from exhaustive. There are countless other things that go into developing this, and again, it goes back to the actual context in which you're operating in. If you want to find out more about psychological safety, I would really recommend reading Daniel Coyle's book, The Culture Code, and also Matthew Syed's book, Black Box Thinking. Some really great insights in that. And I'm also thinking about doing a few videos on high performance teams and using specific case studies. So if that's something you'd be interested in, I'd really appreciate you to provide some suggestions in the comments below. And I just want to thank you for watching the video. If you did find it useful, it would really help me out if you gave it a thumbs up. And if you're interested in future videos, then please do hit that subscribe button and hit the notification bell, and I will see you in the next video.